Pat Tillman was a symbol of heroism in the war on terror, an NFL star who left behind a $3.6 million contract and his new wife to fight for his country after the attacks of September 11th.
Pat Tillman, the Arizona Cardinals safety, was known for his fierce tackles.
Shoots it over the middle, and wow, what a hit! Pat Tillman knocked the helmet off of Isaac Byrd.
Unbridled spirit on the football field.
Here we go, baby, let's go. Okay, I'm just saying, initially we were at 6.
Right.
Rob, stay Rob.
Tillman and Marie were married only a few days when he enlisted. By July 2002, married just 2 months, he was in boot camp.
As always, Marie is on my mind. I've been unable to speak with her since we've been here, and I miss the sound of her voice.
Pat and his brother Kevin enlisted together and served together in the elite Army Rangers. But Pat Tillman was the most famous soldier in the Army at that time and very important to a Pentagon trying to maintain public support for the war.
Donald Rumsfeld was a guy who happened to notice when Pat enlisted. He sent him a personal letter and tried really hard to turn him into the poster boy. He was watching Tillman's every move from the moment he enlisted throughout his, they knew, you know, when Pat Tillman coughed, they knew it.
Yet Pat shunned the limelight and refused to do any interviews once he joined the Army.
He didn't want any special treatment. He was content just being like everybody else. He didn't want to be glorified or put up on a pedestal. He just wanted to do what he believed in.
He wasn't at all what I expected to find. He didn't seem like this tough knucklehead guy. You know, he was interested in Emerson and Chomsky, and he just seemed very just open. It didn't matter who you were, where you were from, what you were into. You know, Pat always wanted to find out what you were about. And he would ask him a million questions. I walked in on him one time, and he was reading the Book of Mormon. And, you know, it really hit me because, you know, I am Mormon. So I asked him, hey, you know, you have any questions, you know, please feel free to ask. You know, I'll explain whatever I can to you as best as I can. I knew that he wasn't religious, but he told me that he respected all religions.
Brian O'Neill was kind of a small guy, very nervous guy. I wasn't real impressed. I think he was really looking for a place to fit in, looking for more family, looking for something that was a little bit of a closer tie.
I was kind of terrified going there because, you know, the rumors of hazing and tricks that the senior guys play on the new guys. Pat was different from everyone else in the platoon. He didn't ever, you know, treat me like I was lower than him. I think the only time, you know, that I upset Pat is, you know, he asked me to, you know, prep some chem lights for an objective we had the next day. And I forgot, you know, I was doing other things. And, you know, he basically let me know that I disappointed him, that I didn't do what he wanted me to do. And that really, you know, I wish he would have taken me in the hallway, you know, and smoked me up and down and, you know, treated me horribly, you know, and called me stupid, you know, but him telling me that I disappointed him, you know, it really upset me, you know, and I decided, you know, I was never going to do that again because he was such a great guy. Yeah, I didn't want to let him down.
When Brian came in, Pat kind of picked him up. He just put an arm around him and scooped him up the best he could.
Everyone was actually envious that he was my team leader, that little scrawny me would be working with this huge football player. And I blamed myself for quite some time that maybe, you know, Pat's not in a place where he should be because I didn't put forth more effort. And, you know, it's something I still think about today.
Shortly after he completed Ranger School in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq.
Pat was extremely upset about this. He thought the war was illegal. He thought it was a mistake. He thought it was going to be a disaster. And, you know, in the Army, you're not supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to talk politics. And Pat didn't shut up. You know, he told everyone who he encountered, this war is illegal as hell.
As it turned out, Pat's first mission was in Iraq, not Afghanistan.
If Kevin and I are part of a situation where we must fight, every bit of my soul knows we will fight as hard as anyone ever has. We will not question the reasons for our being here or allow any personal beliefs to interfere with our job. My hope is that decisions are being made with the same good faith that Kevin and I aim to display. I hope this war is about more than oil, money, and power. I doubt that it is.
Do you think later on he thought this is about oil?
Oh, there's no doubt. The more time the more time Pat spent in Iraq, the more and more he realized this whole thing was terrible.
Pat's first mission turned out to be a high-profile rescue.
Pat and Kevin Tillman were part of the rescue for Jessica Lynch. They were involved in that. And as the Army was sending, 1,000 troops, they're organizing this incredible number of people to rescue her, Pat looked around and said, wait a minute, something's fishy here.
One day before her rescue, Pat expressed in his journal suspicions about the operation. He questioned why so many special forces were involved in it.
This mission will be a POW rescue, a woman named Jessica Lynch. I do believe this to be a big public relations stunt. Do not mistake me. I wish everyone in trouble to be rescued, but sending this many folks in for a single low-ranking soldier screams of media blitz. In any case, I'm glad to be able to do my part, and I hope we bring her home safe.
Of course, it turned out he was right. The operation had been a publicity stunt. Lynch was being treated at an Iraqi hospital, and her doctors had tried to turn her over to the Army in the days before the raid.
True courage.
She shot until she ran out of ammunition.
She's alive. She's being tortured.
The military was not what Pat expected it to be.
He thought, just like, the majority of people in this country, that going into Afghanistan was the right thing to do. And then, of course, once they enlisted, the talk started veering towards going into Iraq. And when they were over there, he didn't like what he saw.
Just watching these bombs and these A-10s strafe the city. That was the first time I'd heard Pat in kind of like no kidding opinion on kind of what was going on there. He just said, this war is just so fucking illegal. Just watching this scene unfold, the city's being blown to shit.
Pat and Kevin, when they came back from Iraq, it's like, this is just 100% bullshit.
I think after coming home from Iraq, he was a little disillusioned. It was right around the halfway mark, and he was in a stage of looking towards the next step.
He'd become much more disillusioned about the Army by what he'd seen in Iraq. But he was going to fulfill his commitment, and he was looking forward to going to Afghanistan.
On April 22, 2004, while on mission in the mountains of Afghanistan near the Pakistan border, a Humvee broke down, and the platoon was ordered to split into two groups. Pat went with one, and his brother went with the other.
It's really sad. It's this tragic cascade of decisions.
I heard the gunfire, and then I saw the tracer rounds pouring out of the canyon.
Insurgents had attacked Kevin's group, and Pat's group raced to support them.
It was almost like a fireworks show, and my adrenaline just immediately spiked. And then once I got out of the vehicle, my squad leader, he was like, all right, this is it, calm down, this is what we trained for. And I kind of, came back to reality for a second. And then we charged up the hill.
Communications were down, and the men under fire, including Tillman's brother, had no idea their fellow Rangers were on the ridge trying to protect them.
The guys being ambushed came racing out, guns blazing.
And I remember he was trying to make contact. He was waving his arms and everything.
Pat and an Afghan soldier serving with him were killed by friendly fire.
I saw him slumped over. I saw O'Neill grab him and pull him back, and that's when I could tell he was hit. Couldn't see it great. No, honestly, I didn't really want to look at it. It's a lot of, I remember seeing a whole, this looked like a mist of red.
When he died in Afghanistan on April 22, 2004, the Army told his family he'd been killed by enemy fire after courageously charging up a hill to protect his fellow Army Rangers. But that story didn't hold up.
But in the entire course of this attack, not a single Ranger was wounded by enemy fire. Not even a bullet hole was found in any of the equipment. Even though you go through all the statements, no one ever saw more than 2 people at a time that were attacking them. And in many cases, they sounded very unsure themselves even saying that.
His family, led by his mother Mary, has been searching for answers about what really happened. beginning the day she heard the news from Pat Tillman's wife, Marie.
And she answered the phone just the way she always does. Her voice sounded just the same. And I was just sort of breathed a sigh of relief, like, oh, you know, everything's fine. And I said, you know, what's up? And she didn't say anything. I said, what is it? You know, what is wrong? And she said, he's dead. And I said, who's dead? And she said, Pat's dead. Within minutes of that, the Army had sent a soldier, a young female soldier, to come tell me. And
what did she say?
She said that he was shot getting out of a vehicle. He was shot in the head getting out of a vehicle. And that's basically all she knew.
Then, about a month later, a stunning announcement. The Army had been investigating his death and determined that Pat Tillman was killed by his own men.
How long do you think it took the Army to realize Pat had been killed by friendly fire?
Oh, they knew immediately. It was pretty evident right away. All the other soldiers on the ridgeline suspected that that's exactly what happened.
How long did it take the Army to tell you?
5 weeks. Even the time lapse is not what is so disturbing to us. If they didn't tell us right away exactly what happened. I mean, it would seem to me that because of the clandestine nature of the Rangers, they could have easily said, well, this is, you know, we can't really divulge this.
It's under investigation.
And under investigation. You know, they could have said anything, but they made up a story.
Made up a story, Mary contends, because when Pat Tillman had left behind his football career to join the Army Rangers, he'd become one of the most high-profile soldiers in the U.S. military.
Kevin, who wasn't there when Pat was killed, he was at the end of the convoy. He got there later. He didn't know Pat was killed by friendly fire. Everyone else was told, don't tell Kevin. He was kept in the dark for a month.
The military told Pat's family he was killed by the Taliban. The Tillmans did not learn the truth until 5 weeks later.
I think it's wrong. I mean, you don't tell somebody a story that didn't happen to try and make them feel better. There's not a whole lot that's going to make them feel better at the time. You might as well just tell them the truth.
We knew. I just don't understand why nobody, told Pat's parents or told, his brother right away. They took the honor away from what we were doing by lying to his family.
Pat's brother Kevin was in the back of the convoy, but hadn't seen what happened. So she tracked down some other Rangers who were there that day.
Pat was pretty much the best person I ever knew.
While there's some disagreement about the details of what happened the day Pat Tillman was killed, as the second convoy raced through the canyon, soldiers in the lead vehicle began firing at the hill, unaware they were shooting at their own men, including Tillman, Russell Bear, and Jade Lane.
All of a sudden the vehicle starts coming around the canyon, and then they opened up again, and then that's when I realized that that's where all the fire was coming from, was from the vehicle. It wasn't coming from the enemy anymore.
Pat Tillman threw out a smoke grenade as a signal, but Russell Bear says after a brief lull, the gunfire only intensified.
I considered shooting our own guys. It was, and I had actually pointed my weapon in their direction and, turned my safety lector on fire, and I was ready to engage them. You just hope for the best. I mean, you're left with nothing. You can't do anything except sit there.
I remember seeing Pat, yell to me, "O'Neill, follow me," and, I did what I was told. He's my team leader. I follow him wherever I go.
And I was really surprised of how quick O'Neill was following Pat. I mean, he had just as much gear on as everybody else, and he was just keeping up with him. I remember getting halfway up this hill and Pat turning around, asking Sergeant Weeks, my squad leader, "Hey, Sergeant Weeks, can we take our body armor off?" And I remember thinking to myself, fuck that, I am keeping my body armor on. And Pat is just wanting to get up there as quickly as possible.
Tillman was about this location, and he asked if he could drop his body armor and start pursuing up this hill. I told him no.
At that time, I noticed there was a Afghani militiaman with us. He jumped in with us, and, we just started running.
It shows the spot where Pat Tillman was killed.
Tillman was in the secret location here.
Behind these boulders, where he was hiding from a rain of bullets.
Started to yell, "Cease fire," and people said, "Hey, I think they're fucking shooting at us." And then, we knew, no shit, that they were shooting at us.
A 50 cal can shoot 900 rounds a minute, and it could have been no less than a minute they were shooting at us. You could see on the rock all the marks from the rounds, all except the spot where I was lying. I just remember thinking, I'm gonna die. And, asking Pat, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna get out of this? And he said, I've got an idea. He popped a smoke grenade and threw it. And they stopped shooting at us. And after they stopped shooting at us, me and Pat stood up, let our hearts slow down for a second. I just remember looking at Pat, asking him, how could that happen? How did they not see us? And, he couldn't answer me. He didn't know. I was actually more afraid for the guys that just got done shooting at us that they were going to get in trouble.
For years, we got this story that Pat was shot from probably 200-300 yards away. They were going about 25 to 35 miles an hour, firing wildly to the right, and Pat and this Afghan were just an unfortunate consequence of people being excited. But Brian O'Neill has said, in no uncertain terms, that that was not the case.
Today was the first day I've ever actually seen this PowerPoint. It's really interesting to see from this perspective now. I don't find this video accurate because it depicts on his account that they were moving continuously through the valley where they were driving. In actuality, from my memory, I remember them stopping and firing on 2 occasions. What he's saying here is a complete lie.
The driver took them from about 100 yards away over to a better location to kill them. Now they're about 40 yards away.
They stopped and then drove forward and then re-engaged us, dismounted, and then started re-engaging us again. At that point, I thought we were all gonna die. And I remember putting my weapon on fire and having my finger on the trigger and knowing that these are my buddies down there, but knowing that they're gonna kill us and kill everybody. And I was, a second away from just loading them up, just killing them all. And I could have done it.
It was not a fog of war, not in my mind at all. I believe it was a less to fight. In fact, I don't think these soldiers were that scared when they came out of that canyon. I think they were relieved they were out of the canyon, and they were just wanted to shoot.
I started to say a prayer out loud, and it was something like, oh God, please, if you can help us out of this situation, I'll be very grateful, and I'll do what I can, to repay you for this debt that I will owe you. And I remember Pat saying, O'Neill, quit praying. God is not the one to help you now. This is reality. This is what we need to focus on. I don't want you to go into some la-la land, not pay attention, and then get killed. I was actually grateful for him to say that. I was really trying to put my focus somewhere else and not keep it here. Pat saved my life. All of a sudden, they started shooting at us again. And I just remember Pat, yelling his name. I'm Pat Tillman. I'm Pat fucking Tillman. Why are you shooting at me?
Pat's last words were repeatedly, I'm Pat fucking Tillman. And that was after he got lit up by the machine gun the first time. He's flat on the ground, he's sitting on the ground. He was hurt. And I suspect he was a bit disappointed that his own team is shooting at him. And I imagine that those comments of his, I'm Pat fucking Tillman, he said while looking right at him with a face that would make most people nervous.
I remember hearing the sound of a drinking fountain, like when you press the button to get water out of the drinking fountain, the sound it makes. And I just look over at my side and I see this blood pouring down this rock that I'm sitting by. His head was gone. He was completely gone. And take my helmet off, and I throw it against the ground, and then I kind of black out.
He's become a symbol of all those American soldiers who have sacrificed their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. But now, these letters to his wife Marie and his personal journal, seen publicly here for the first time, reveal that in the year leading to his death, he'd come to have serious doubts about the way America was fighting its war on terror.
He was really smart about politics, and he knew that there was a really good chance that if he died, that administration would try to capitalize on it for their benefit, and he didn't want that to happen.
Tillman feared that if something were to happen to him, he too would be used as propaganda, and he shared this with some of his platoon mates.
Mary Tillman and some of her son's fellow Rangers say that before he died, Pat Tillman expressed his fear that if something happened to him, his death would be exploited by the military and used as propaganda. What do you think Pat would think of all this?
He'd hate it. Sure hate it.
He would be, you know, just insanely upset, and then I think, you know, like when he kind of looked back on it, he'd just laugh, you know, he'd be like, I can't, you know, this is just criminal. And those would probably be his exact words, this is criminal.
Did it seem like Pat's death was being treated differently than any other soldier's death because of his high profile?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right off the bat.
In a standard Army deployment form Pat filled out before he left for Iraq, he made it very clear he did not want the military to have any direct involvement with his funeral. Nevertheless, the military did.
If he was here right now and find out what happened, what do you think he would feel about the way that his funerals were treated?
He would be so angry. He would be so hurt and furious at what his families had to suffer at the hands of the Army and the government. I mean, you know, he would want to come down and wring someone's neck, for sure.
He was always giving gifts. Thanks, Pat. I didn't write shit, because I'm not a writer. And I just want to say there's a lot of people here, thanks. It was really amazing to be his little baby brother. Yeah, I'm not just gonna sit up here and break down on you, but thanks for coming. Pat's a fucking champion, and always will be. Just make no mistake, he'd want me to say this. He's not with God, he's fucking dead. He's not religious, so thanks for your thoughts, but he's fucking dead. I don't regret any of that. You know, as far as what I was thinking, I was just simply miserable. You know, I was sad for my whole family. I was sad for my mom, my dad, Marie, Kevin. This isn't a production. It's my brother's service. I didn't plan on saying that. It just, he's not what these people wished he was. Everyone grabbed at Pat's death. Not necessarily just the military. Everybody grabbed at him. They just chose the wrong family to try to do it in front of.
And I would probably talk to you in a lot more crazy fashion about it, but since I'm on national television, I'll do just the same.
Well, you are.
I think that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something. I mean, I'm his brother, so I'm highly biased. I mean, I think he was fucking Jesus, and I don't even think there's a Jesus. He was the real Jesus.
Well,
so
and you're not a shy guy. I mean, let me show the clip from the funeral, because at his memorial service, you were drinking.
No, actually, I wasn't. I just had a beer in my hand. That was my rambunctious self, Bill.
Beer in your hand, drinking. You're right. Two different things.
I was working on getting drunk.
But, you know, they had Maria Shriver and John McCain, who I assume were his two close friends.
Oh, yeah. On Facebook.
Right. Speaking there, and Maria said, Pat, you are home, you are safe. And McCain said, you will see Pat again when a loving God reunites us all with our loved ones. And then you got up, show the clip of what you said.
Thanks for coming. Pat's a fucking champion, and always will be. just make no mistake, you want me to say this, he's not with God, he's fucking dead, he's not religious, so thanks for your thoughts, but he's fucking dead. That's, I had a
That's
different...
a lot of balls, my friend. That's.
I had a different poem written. That just flowed. It flowed so well.
It's like the beginning of The Hangover Part 2.
Exactly. No, I found it offensive. You know, it's like, I don't go to a church and say this is bullshit, so don't come to my brother's service and tell me that he's with God. He's simply not with fucking God.
Yeah. Well, and that's...
But shortly into his service, Tillman was tragically killed while on patrol by his fellow soldiers. Yet instead of admitting to this egregious case of friendly fire and informing Tillman's family about the true circumstances surrounding his death, the government did everything in its power to cover up the incident and make it appear that Tillman was killed by enemy combatants.
Mary Tillman believes she has evidence that the Army went to extraordinary lengths to keep what really happened under wraps. She points to the fact that Pat's uniform, which according to one soldier had the marks left by American bullets, was burned, which is against Army procedure. Then there was the coroner, who refused to sign the autopsy for months because when he examined the body, he said the gunshot wounds were not consistent with the Army's original story.
I'm gonna go burn Pat's uniform. No. You don't piss without permission. So, this goes pretty damn high.
According to John Krakauer, who wrote an extensive book on Tillman's death, quote, his uniform and body armor were burned, and his weapon, helmet, even a part of his brain, which fell to the ground after the attack, disappeared. But if this insane act wasn't enough, the Army even burnt his military notebook, forever erasing Tillman's thoughts and feelings in the days and weeks leading up to his death. Perhaps because his journal might have exposed how Tillman had changed his mind about U.S. foreign policy. Yes, according to his friend Army Specialist Russell Baer, Tillman told him that this war is effing illegal. The soldiers who were with Tillman were instructed to keep quiet about the incident and continue to tell Tillman's family that he was killed by the Taliban for over a month. But this cover-up went far beyond just a group of soldiers that were with Tillman that fateful day. In fact, former Afghanistan General Stanley McChrystal knew that Tillman was killed by friendly fire, yet signed off on awarding him the Silver Star, an honor never bestowed upon friendly fire victims.
And remember the citation on the Silver Star which left the distinct impression Pat had been killed by enemy fire? It was later revealed that the eyewitness statements had been altered.
What happened, sir, was
Army Ranger Brian O'Neill testified before Congress last spring.
Did you write these sentences claiming that you were engaged with the enemy?
No, sir.
Their testimony was altered by someone to make it appear as though Pat was killed by the enemy.
The general now running the entire operation in Afghanistan now, General McChrystal. You in your book talk about his role in all of this.
McChrystal is extremely quiet. He covers his tracks, he avoids publicity, but we do know that McChrystal was notified probably the night Pat was killed and certainly the next day.
We interviewed McChrystal in Afghanistan this past July. We asked him to answer a few questions about Tillman. He refused. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld also refused to be interviewed for this story.
And in the years since Tillman's death, several FOIA requests have actually raised more questions than they've answered. According to documents provided to the AP by the Department of Defense in 2007, the doctor that performed the autopsy was suspicious of the 3 close-range gunshot wounds in Tillman's forehead and had asked the Army's Criminal Investigation Unit to open up a criminal case, to no avail.
New outrage tonight over remarks by a U.S. Army officer after the friendly fire death of Pat Tillman, covered up in Afghanistan. Pat Tillman's mother, Mary, says she is appalled that the officer suggested the family is not at peace with Tillman's death because of their lack of religious faith.
He said that we would never be satisfied because we're not Christians and we're just a pain in the ass, basically. He also said that it must make us feel terrible that Pat's warm dirt.
The offending comment was posted on ESPN.com last summer. It suggested the Tillman family's dissatisfaction with the Army was due in part to a lack of religious faith. and it quoted Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Kozlarek, who conducted the second investigation into Tillman's death.
I don't know, these people that have a hard time letting it go. And maybe because of their religious beliefs. So I don't know how an atheist thinks.
Right.
But I can only imagine that would be pretty tough.
Right.
If you're an atheist and you don't believe in anything, if you die, what is there to go to? Nothing. You're worm dirt. It's pretty hard to get your head around that.
So you suspect that's probably a reason for this thing is dragging on?
I think so. There's not a whole lot of trust.
And the Army also won't reveal the religious affiliation of Colonel Kozlarek, who is now a battalion commander in Iraq. CNN tried to reach him through the Army. He was not available because he's in the war zone. An Army spokesman says he doesn't currently face any disciplinary action for these remarks. However, he does come under sharp criticism from the DOD Inspector General for his lackluster investigation of the Tillman death back in 2004. Lou?
The Army is not distinguishing itself in this case, is it?
Well, a lot of people would share that view.
I would hope that the generals in that building from which you're reporting would share it. I find this absolutely, and I have to believe most Americans find this absolutely disgraceful. And for the United States Army, members of the United States Army, to lie about the death of Pat Tillman, serving his country at great sacrifice to himself, an example, a heroic example of duty to one's country. To have the United States Army lie about it, and then one of its officers, a colonel, to speak like that of a man killed in uniform, I would hope there is a sense of outrage within the Pentagon. Is there, Jamie?
Well, you know, I think everybody acknowledges that these remarks are at best insensitive and at worst, you know, very offensive. But the other thing is we have not been able to talk to Lieutenant Colonel Kozlarek.
Yeah.
We
no,
don't
I understand
know
that, Jamie. What I'm asking you, is there a sense of outrage within the Pentagon that you've been able to perceive?
Well, I think everyone...
Not just about his comments, but about this entire Tillman episode.
Well, the Army has, the people I've talked to have felt, you know, they've acknowledged from the very beginning that was mishandled. They've gone to great length to talk about how they're trying to do things differently. There is an acknowledgement that was terribly mishandled and a mistake, and the Army has put out formal statements saying that.
Jamie, thank you very much. Jamie McIntyre from the Pentagon.
What shocked you by that investigation?
No one's asking the right questions. They're not asking any questions.
Pat's brother Kevin later went before Congress to talk about it.
My name is Kevin Tillman. 2 days ago marked the 3rd anniversary of the death of my older brother, Pat Tillman, Spear, Afghanistan. To our family and friends, it was a devastating loss. To the nation, it was a moment of disorientation. To the military, it was a nightmare. But to others within the government, it appears to have been an opportunity. A terrible tragedy was transformed into an inspirational message that served instead to support the nation's foreign policy wars. After the truth of Pat's death was partially revealed, the Army was now left with the task of briefing our family and answering our questions. With any luck, our family would sink quietly into our grief, and the whole unsavory episode would be swept under the rug. However, they miscalculated our family's reaction. Through the amazing strength and perseverance of my mother, the most amazing woman on earth, our family has managed to have multiple investigations conducted. However, while each investigation gathered more information, the mountain of evidence was never used to arrive at an honest or even sensible conclusion. That is why we ask Congress, as a sovereign representative of the whole people, to investigate Pat's death. Anything less than the truth is a betrayal of those values that all soldiers who have fought for this nation have sought to uphold. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Tillman, I know he was speaking for both of you. Is there anything you want to add briefly? Or
I would like to say, we have been asked over and over again, well, what can we do for your family? How can we appease you? And it makes me sick. It's not about our family. Our family will never be satisfied. We'll never have Pat back. But what is so outrageous is this isn't about Pat. This is about what they did to a nation. Pat died for this country, and he believed it was a great country that had a system that worked. It's not perfect. No one has ever said that. But to write these glorious tales is really a disservice to Pat and to all the other soldiers. You're diminishing their true heroism. It may not be pretty, it may not be like out of a John Wayne movie, but that's not what war is all about. It's ugly, it's bloody, it's painful. Everyone should understand what's going on. And we shouldn't have smoke screens thrown in our face.
Thank you.
I don't blame her.
We asked Pete Guerin, the new Secretary of the Army, how this could have happened. Who do you think Secretary Guerin altered those soldiers' statements when it came to that Silver Star?
Well, that's one of the questions that we will never completely answer, but it certainly is one of the areas that raises questions. There are so many mistakes, so many things that happen. If you add them all together, it certainly calls into question the credibility of those who handled this and raises the kind of questions that Ms. Tillman raises. I don't blame her for that, and I don't expect her ever to believe this. But there was no intent to deceive. There were mistakes and grievous errors by the legions, and as a result, we fell short of our duty to her as the mother of one of our heroes.
If there was no effort to deceive, why wasn't she told right away that her son's death was being investigated as a possible friendly fire incident?
She should have been, and Army policy requires that she be notified right away. This was a classified mission, and the people in the operation mistakenly believed that they were not supposed to release any of the details of the investigation until the investigation was complete. They released it 35 days later. But we've had 7 investigations, and they have all concluded that there was no deceit, no intentional deceit, no cover-up.
Mary Tillman says each investigation revealed the flaws of the one before, and she chronicles her fight for answers in a new book, Boots on the Ground by Dusk.
In fact, it's taken 10 years for anyone involved to admit even a smidgen of responsibility for Tillman's death. But just last week, Army Ranger Stephen Elliott, who was one of the soldiers who fired at Tillman, told ESPN that, quote, "It would be disingenuous for me to say that there's no way my rounds didn't kill him, because my rounds very well could have. I still fired on a friendly position, and that wouldn't change my sense of responsibility." This sentiment means little for Brian O'Neill, who was also shot at next to Pat Tillman but survived. In the same ESPN piece, O'Neill is asked whether he forgives those who shot at him and killed Tillman. His response, quote, "To forgive somebody means I have to think about them, and I don't. They're meaningless to me. I guess to forgive them means I have to acknowledge they exist." And just like O'Neill, the Army has done everything in its power to pretend that this event doesn't exist by holding on to Pat Tillman the myth instead of honoring his real legacy as an anti-war hero.
You've made it very clear about your feelings toward the Bush administration and your opposition to the war in Iraq. Is that partially what's motivating you?
No, if this happened under anyone's watch, I'd still be doing the same thing.
Why have you fought so hard?
Well, because Pat would want us to. Pat was a pretty honest guy, not a perfect person by any stretch, but he was a very honest person, and he would want us to do this.
What will it take to satisfy you? What do you need to know, or what information?
But that's the point that everyone seems to miss. This isn't about us. It's about what they've done to the public. This was a public deception.
Many American families have suffered the same terrible sacrifice that the Tillman family now suffers.
Boy, that escalated quickly.